Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our show today. We have a wonderful guest. We have Jake Pentland, who is a person who I've known for several years, a podcaster, a writer, a person very involved in politics and many other forms of activism. So this show, we're going to make a show of whereby we're going to be Democrats. In other words, you can't say this and you can't say that. We're going to censor everything. Of course not. We're not Democrats. We are Americans. We're freedom-loving people, and we don't believe in the radical left. Right? Make America great again. That's it. So, first of all, how are you? First of all,
I'm doing great, man. Do I sound good?
Good.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I'm doing great. Obviously we had a big election here that went our way, and we're very happy. I was very nervous up to it, so I'm basking in the glory of that. But there's a few things happening that are still, I'm still keeping my edge.
right.
I don't trust. I don't necessarily trust the American government to do the right thing all the time. We gave them a mandate. We told them what we wanted, and now it's just a question of whether or not they're going to do it, or we're going to have to keep fighting. But overall, I'm good. How about you?
Good. I'm very good. Thank you. First, I appreciate you and your mom, what you've been doing for everyone in the last year, especially in the last 6 months, and bringing together Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi to work with Donald Trump, and basically working behind the scenes. Tremendous stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, we can't take all the credit. Obviously, there were a lot of machinations in that, but we do feel like, especially with Bobby, when he was on, he was still running for president. He was independent. He was still trying to get in with the Democrats. A lot of our followers were upset that we were even talking to RFK at that time. But, we knew, and we said as much when we met him. I mean, you could tell the stars were aligning for him to drop out and endorse Trump. And Nicole Shanahan, his vice president, was also on our podcast. She's tremendous.
Yeah.
She's a friend of ours now. So, did we force them to join Trump? No, but I do think we played an important part in it. Yeah, I'm taking credit. Actually, screw it. I'm going to take all the credit. It was all me.
Great, fantastic, right? Fantastic. The idea of having people coming together, this election really showed that who really woke up. We have to thank the working class people. We have to thank the minorities. They woke up. Future generations will say that November 2024 the world was saved by the working class, because the insanity that was done by the extreme left was just beyond belief, beyond the pale.
Absolutely. And, I've been fighting this a very, very long time, just in my own life, even with, on a personal level with friends and family. And then, of course, on a more professional level with the podcasting and social media and whatnot. I saw this going dark probably before most people, early back when I was in high school in like the mid 90s, when it was called political correctness. Mm-hmm. And they were doing the warning labels on hip hop albums, and Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, was part of it. And it wasn't really anything horrible at the time. It just the hairs on my neck stood up. Like, where is this going? Because now this is the very early roots of speech control. And at that time, I was a Democrat and a liberal, and my mom was too. And, we were all for it. We loved Al Gore. And, I just kind of was like, oh, it's probably nothing. But the more I saw it, and by the time I got out of high school, which would have been 96 when I graduated, I was starting to go, okay, this is full Orwellian. This is a plan they have to limit speech. And this is the early days of the internet. Like, no one knew what the internet was going to be. And then I got on the internet and social media, and you know what happened in all around the world, the Arab Spring. Like, it was this really exciting time where we thought, okay, yeah, they're trying to control speech. Yeah, the government's kind of Orwellian, but we have the internet. And again, ahead of the curve, I saw them starting to control the internet. This was at this time when I started alerting. This was about 2015, 2016. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, all these different platforms, they started putting these safety teams on. We're trying to stop bullying. And so I said, okay, at that time, like the war on free speech, the war against the working class, the war against patriots and sane, rational Americans, it's fully on. And yeah, I think this last election, that was our way of saying, I think everybody else caught up and they said, if we don't stop this radical left, they're going to take over America. There'll never be a free and fair election again. And by extension, Israel will no longer be safe or as safe without us. And if Israel falls and US falls to this globalist agenda, I mean, that's ball game. That's the end of the world. The West is done. The East wins. And I think that message got to people in time, and it feels that way. It really does. It feels like what you're saying is right. The working class said enough.
Yeah, they woke up.
Thank God.
Yeah, really, Baruch Hashem, thank God.
Baruch Hashem, yeah.
Yeah, they did it. They saw let's say this way, they saw beneath or beyond all the lies and rhetoric. And especially people saying, who will Trump be? What is Trump? We already had 4 years of Trump, so people knew who Trump was, Yeah. And then you have Bobby De Niro coming along a few weeks ago and saying, Trump will be this and Trump will be that. And then Elon Musk says, well, we already had him for 4 years, so we know exactly what he's capable of and what he wants to do. The insanity was just amazing.
It was. And I tell people, because you're in Israel, right? And a lot of people around the world, I talk to people all over, and one of the questions I got all the time was, how can Americans be this dumb? Or how can they be out of touch? Because it's pretty obvious to everybody else. I mean, especially like the onset of communism. A lot of countries around the world have dealt with the disaster that communism brings. They fled here to America to get away from communist regimes. And then they're here like, hey, let's do this communist agenda. And a lot of like the Cubans and Puerto Ricans, for example, that voted for Trump, a lot of it was that they were telling a lot of other Americans, like, no, what the Democrats are doing, they did in our country. So that's why we fled. But, Bobby De Niro, that kind of movement, what people have to understand, and what you guys, if you're curious, if your followers over in Israel or any other countries, or even in America and they're not aware, have to understand is there is a propaganda wing here that is one of the most powerful, if not powerful, most powerful propaganda wings the history of the world has ever seen. And you can't underestimate the assault on free thought that happens in America. I know that other countries have seen propaganda. I know communist countries have seen it, Russia with Pravda, but I think people kind of have this default assumption that America doesn't do that. And not only do we do that, we invented it. And we are now turning it on our own people. And I think the CIA, I think a lot of the government agencies are behind this propaganda wing to push on us. And I think that's why people are so stupid here. I think I don't even think I think they're just.
I'm going to surprise you if you come to Israel, and you'll see in Israel, the left wing is also the same way. Yeah. Now, I come from a left wing background, so Democrat and so forth. But over the years, I saw it happen. And the left wing, what's so special about the left wing is that for them, they have moral self-righteousness. They think they're superior to everybody else. They're smarter than everybody else. So for them, it's the ends justify the means, no matter what. They can kill 20 million people, and it's okay because society will get better. They can suppress people because they know better. So, for example, last week I put a post showing, in fact, it was this week, how Trump just came out with a wonderful statement saying that one of his first acts he's going to do is going to take away accreditation from any college that promotes anti-Semitism. So I placed that in TikTok, right? To show everybody, all my friends here in Israel, hey, look, you see, I told you don't worry about Trump. So someone from the left said, no, it's all an act. He's still Hitler. Hitler, are you crazy? How can you call this man Hitler? Do you understand? Yeah. That's the left wing. And remember, you ever heard of Yuri Bezmenov? Yeah. It's exactly.
Absolutely. And he was right. He said it would take 2 generations?
Yes.
And that was that interview. What was that on?
It was 1984. He did that. And he gave her the whole range of what's going to happen. And he broke it down quickly.
Yeah. And and he was right. And I think it's easy to say with him that, Russia and the KGB or whatever they're called now was part of it. And they're definitely a player in the world stage, but nobody ever talks about the Muslim Brotherhood. And what's funny is, me and my mom do this podcast every week, and we have a lot of followers that don't like Jews and don't like Israel. It's just the way it is. And it's fine. We understand it. If you're supporting us, we feel like we're in a position to educate. And we did a episode last week with, a gentleman that was a Jewish man, and it was pro-Jewish content. Of course, the comments, most of them were good, but then of course you have the comments like, Jews kill babies, eat babies, you run the world, the whole stuff. And I said, it'll be on the podcast that airs tonight. I had said, I liken it to people like teenagers when they have their first taste of alcohol, when you're like out partying, your parents don't know, and you have like a beer or two or schnapps or whatever, and you get sick because you're not used to it. And someone like me at 45, who's like a seasoned alcoholic now, I'm at a whole other level. So I can look at someone that's just new to drinking and seeing that they can't handle it. I use that as an analogy to where I see people that are just starting to see that there are forces at play and there are propaganda forces at play. And they're just like first or second level. And they're going to see Jews in Israel and the banks. And I get it. Some of it's true, but they never go past that. And it's like, why are we talking about Jews constantly running the world and Trump's Hitler, and never mention the Muslim Brotherhood, which dwarfs AIPAC in money. I mean, the money from Qatar, however you say it, that comes from the universities here in America, that lobbies for politicians here, dwarfs any Jewish money. And I can prove it because there's 17 million Jews on the planet right now, something like that. There are over less. There are over 1 billion Muslims and Muslim Brotherhood. They have oil money. They're huge, but nobody ever talks about it. And when you come here in the States, it's like, yeah, Jews run the world. Jews are evil. We got to protect the Palestinians. And it's like, you're only at that first level of starting to understand. And you can't even name people that are really pulling the strings or it's like Russia, it's Israel. It's never the Muslim Brotherhood. It's never communists. It's never war party or globalists. It's never Republicans. It's never Democrats in their eyes, but it's bigger than that. It's the World Economic Forum. Like, these are huge, powerful players. So I look at a lot of people that say, Jews do this or Trump is Hitler. And I'm like, okay, your first level, it's your first beer. Keep researching. You just fell in the rabbit hole. You're falling. You're connecting the dots. That's great. Keep going. Do not stop. Just go, it's the Jews, and stop. Because that's just, you're an amateur at that point.
Right. Yeah, good point. Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I talked a lot.
No, it's very important. You said a very good point. And, example, you mentioned before the population of Israel, the Jewish people, right? About 15 million people, 15 million people out of basically 8 billion people. So let's talk about propaganda, right? Yeah. Christianity is doing propaganda, has been doing propaganda for 2,000 years, right? Yeah. And Islam is doing 1,500 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in terms of propaganda, who's really doing the propaganda wars? These two religions, right? Yeah. And Judaism doesn't go out and proselytize to anybody, right? But the same token, people don't realize it. Judaism, the Jewish people, were started by two non-Jewish people, Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah were non-Jewish people who were born in Iraq, who made a revolution. And the revolution was that they said in their time, and guess what? Child sacrifice is not good, that illicit immorality is not good, that people should not be engaging in violence and so forth, and that basically that God is one and indivisible, and we're all made in God's image. This is revolutionary. Now, 4,000 years later, it's still revolutionary. But the thing is this: why does Christianity, if you think about it, and Islam always hate the Jews? Now, if you go to countries that don't have Islam there or Christianity, you won't find anti-Semitism. Do you have anti-Semitism in India? No. Why? Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, example, let's assume you have a store, right? And you have a wonderful store, and I come along and I make my store the same thing as your store. All of a sudden, you're the competition, right? What do I have to do because I want to get you out of the system? I got to knock you down, right? Now get another store. Now, and they want to do the same product, so now they have to get rid of me and you. So then it'll be here. The first store was Judaism, the Jewish people. Then came Christianity. So they have to get rid of competition, us.
Right.
Then came Islam. So they have to get rid of Christians and Jews, competition. So if you see over here, and we still have for up to 2,000 years of Christianity and 1,500 years of Islam, we still won't bend to their quote unquote revolution, their change. If they come from us and they admit that Christianity comes from Judaism and Islam comes from Christianity and Judaism, then you have to go back to the source. And they don't want to go back to the source. They want to change everything. And that's when they can control.
Absolutely. And you can't really rewrite history in any way that anybody's gonna accept. I mean, you can do propaganda, you can play on people's emotions, which they do, and you can get people angry, and you can F, so I'm not swearing, F with the competition, like you're saying. I love that. But at the end of the day, anybody would just open a history book or the Bible, just look and go, oh, okay, the Jews were there first. And you can't argue. So then the argument comes, because I say this all the time, but I've noticed their argument is no longer about what's first. It's that they say to me, this is the new one I'm getting. Well, how far back do you go? Because before Jews, there were Sumerians, there were other people that lived, which is true. I mean, we don't actually know. None of us know. I mean, if you're secular and you're just looking at like archaeological evidence, you're an atheist, you could say there were civilizations long before. So then how can you say they're first if there were civilizations before? So now they're making the argument that it doesn't really matter who's first, which, on a larger scale, I can understand that point. But if you're talking about the Palestinian conflict, or, if you're talking about Palestine and land grabs, that is really important. I mean, I was in real estate for 6 months. I can tell you who owns the deed on the land is more important than who's claiming to own the deed. It's whose name's on the deed, right? So you can't really make that argument where you say, oh, it doesn't really matter who's there first, but then immediately followed up with by saying that's our land. Jews took it. Like, what? How do you wrap that in your head?
Right.
Well, then they go, well, UN did it and Palestine was there, and then they gave it to Israel and Israel took it. It's like, okay, so now you're saying Palestinians were Palestine were there first before 1940. That's what they're saying. Okay, well, let's go back. Oh no, we don't need to go back. It just starts there. And it's like, no, you don't get to do that. So none of their arguments ever hold up. And I'm using the Israel Palestine conflict as an example, but it's the same with the East and West. It's the same with communism and capitalism. It's the same with progress. It's all of that. It's always the same argument, which is you have a historical record. Trump was president. You have something you can cite where you go, hey, our argument, we're pointing to history here. Here's what Trump did in 4 years. They're running on Kamala. She's going to do this. She's going to be a change agent when she was the vice president for 4 years. And they make those arguments, and in their head, it's perfectly rational. And I think the scariest thing of all is that you say that there's propaganda. We say there's propaganda, but I think part of them believes it. I don't think it's just always to take out the competition or to push communism. I think that's part of it. I think overall, they really do think that the way they view history in the world is real. Even if you cite a perfect example that blows their entire argument to water, then that's why they just respond and get very aggressive and try and censor you and ruin your life. I guess what I'm trying to say, I'll wrap this up, sorry, because it's coming to me now.
No, good.
It's more fairly to say that they're in a cult.
Mm-hmm.
They being the left. It's a religious cult, because when you know anyone in a religious cult or a cult of any kind, if you've ever talked to them, you know that you can't take them out of that cult if you're worried about them and just say, hey, here's some logic and reason. Here's why your thing isn't real. They get very, very angry. They call you a heretic, and throughout history, they'll kill you for that. When you challenge someone's cult brain, we'll call it, they get really aggressive and will kill 20 or 30 million people to prove it. So in a roundabout way, I don't know that we're just dealing with Muslim and Christian influence or communist influence. I think we're dealing with people that are brainwashed in a cult, and they are so threatened by pointing out fact that they'll kill you. And that's the scariest person of all to deal with.
Totally agree.
Sorry, again, rambling.
No, you're right. No, you're not. The point you're saying was exactly it. You see, even though I'm a rabbi, I hate religion. I hate religion.
Yeah.
What do I hate religion for? Religion is something that's man-made in order to do what? To influence you to do things that you know that basically is wrong. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. When idol worshiping was first began thousands of years ago, one of the reasons why it was created was to justify immorality. Because if you think about it, people were killing their children, people were doing immoral things, adultery and so forth. But they said, wait a second, my God said this, my God said that, right? So they used religion in order to justify their evil. Right. The difference is when it comes to Torah, so when people in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses and the 24 books of the Torah itself, the Tanakh, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and all the commentaries, you'll see that here, God does not speak about what he wants in terms of his pleasure. It's the opposite. He's very strict about morality. God of Israel is very strict about morality, about justice, about kindness, about love. So much so that if you think about it, the first statement of love thy neighbor as thyself is in the 3rd book of Moses. It's in Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 18. Now, in that statement, love thy neighbor as thyself, I am God, the 3 relationships, you and your friend, you and God, and you and yourself. Now, the 3 sins a person it can never break, even let's assume there's a gun pointed at his head. And these are the 3 cardinal sins you can never do. If someone told you, go commit idolatry, go worship an idol, better to die than to do such a thing. If someone told you to go murder someone else, better to die than to kill someone else. If someone told you to do an illicit affair, adultery and so forth, better to die than to do to have an illicit affair. Now, why is that so? Because love thy neighbor is you and your friend, right? As thyself, that's you and yourself. I am God, it's between you and God. These 3 relationships is basically the concept of relationship between you and God, you and your friend, and you and yourself. Now, you and God, that's in the realm of what we say to understand theology. You and your friend to do in the realm of understanding interrelationships between people. And you and yourself to do with holiness, seeing yourself as a human being that's going to be holy. Now, you mentioned before about the people saying that going back to the past, right? Now, how does it relate to going back to the past? Because the Torah tells exactly the story about who was there in the land of Israel. We said Abraham and Sarah came to the land of Israel. There were people there before, so we're very honest about it. We're very, very honest about it. We don't hide anything. But in terms of history, of all the nations that ever survived, we're the longest. The Judeans, the Jews, and the things, the Romans are the very eyewitnesses because they gave us the name Jew based on the word Judea. So that means for the last 200 years, our very enemies have been the eyewitnesses who were telling the whole world, we, the Jews, come from Judea. And Hanukkah is about a war, a religious war, a war to save the Jewish people were in Judea, right? Yeah. So now it's going back to before about what? About people are brainwashed. The point they will do anything to protect their identity. Because why? If I put you on defense and I tell you everything you said about yourself is wrong, you'll have a mental breakdown. Yeah. And that's what people are having now. Look, in front of our very eyes, the left is having a mental breakdown. Yeah. And it's because, and I watched it on Twitter, celebrities or leftists before the election, they were so convinced that Trump didn't have a chance. They were citing polls and Kamala raised $1 billion and Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And they were so arrogant. And when we'd come on and go, well, can't always trust the polls. We were just kind of lambasted. And I'm talking about, things I dealt with on social media or my mom's social media. And I remember thinking, if Trump does win, they're going to have this moment where they're like, oh my God, we were wrong. We were lied to. Because the press had told them, legacy media told them that everything, like I said, the assault on their brains, that's essentially idol worship. If you think about it, what
the information they're taking is idol worship. And then when something happens where they're wrong, it's crushing to your spirit because not only were you lied to and wrong, but like you said, everything that you identify as yourself is now wrong. You've lost sense of self. It's not just an election. And you have a choice when those things happen. I tell people this all the time because this happens to everybody on some level. Like we all are faced with loss or a moment where we realize maybe we were wrong about something. It happened. You're human.
Right.
In those moments, I always tell people, when you feel that fear and like everything's lost, take a breath, reground yourself. Don't react from that because what you're really dealing with is a loss of ego and an ego death and a loss of self that it doesn't really apply to your relationship with the world. It's in here. It's just, you were wrong. So be wrong. Be okay with being wrong. Take the L, so to speak, and come back right. Think about, where did I go wrong? Who was I listening to that was giving me wrong information? And give yourself the grace to rebuild. And it's really crazy to me. And I did this when I used to podcast. I would talk about this all the time. People would always say that I was so obsessed with winning. I would always talk about how I won and I was right. Part of it was the show, but the true philosophy there is mine is I'm always right. Because when I am wrong, or those moments happen where I'm like, oh my God, I was wrong, I then go, okay, I need to change so that I can be right. Mm-hmm. So I'm always right. Even if I'm wrong, it's just a temporary setback, but I'm going to eventually, like water, I'm going to flow over the rocks and I'm going to be right. So I don't view being wrong as an identity loss or any kind of ego. It's like, oh, okay, well, I made a mistake. I listened to the wrong person. I'm human. I mean, the information, I feel bad for a lot of Democrats in America because they're getting it from the legacy media. These are trusted news sources and have been for 50 to 100 years. Of course, they're more inclined to believe it. So it's very hard to go, oh my God, CNN lied to me. But they did lie to you. And so take the L and find an alternate news source, right? But what people really tend to do is they go, when they feel that ego death and loss, oh my God, I was lied to, they short circuit and they're like, okay, I'm not going to do the work. I'm not going to change my course. I'm not going to be right. I'm going to just be this much more wrong, this much harder. And I'm going to destroy everything that challenges it. And they entrench in this sphere of wrongness or whatever you want to call it. And that's what most people do. And I'm not trying to like say I'm the greatest human being ever. That is something that I have never understood. I don't know if grace of God or the wiring in my brain. I would never do that because I don't want to be wrong. I have such ego about it that if I was going to entrench in something wrong and become a lunatic and cut off friends and family and push propaganda and lies, I would know in my heart every night that I'm doing the wrong thing and I'm wrong. And I'm being a bad person too. I'm being mean about it. I don't want that. So I don't understand the cult brain or the reptile brain or anybody that when this happens that entrenches. I don't understand it. I think that's the biggest problem. What really happened in America, what's happened throughout history with this election, is it's people that are kind of reptilian and so convinced that they're right, that they're never going to change. It's idol worship. Mm-hmm. And then it's the rest of us that are like, I believe there's another source at play. I believe there's a higher thing at play, and I'm just going to be better. And that's since the time of Moses, Rob, like some Jews wanted to stay slaves. They didn't believe it. And there's multiple parables throughout history, but that's what's happening. It's a division of people that want to grow and be right and people that want to entrench and be wrong. And it's just pretty much every war in human history comes down to that. And I don't get it.
Yeah, you made a good point, basically. You're just saying that you're always right going along. That's an interesting concept. Why? A person, so to speak, has failures along the way. Each failure is basically another step to success.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Exactly. You're learning from each failure. So you're not really failing. You're going to a success. Exactly right.
You're improving. You're growing. You're learning. Like you learn how to be right by understanding first where you're wrong. You need that frame of reference to compare it to. So if you're lost in the ethers and think you're right and you're not, and then you're entrenched and go crazy, well, no, you're never going to be right because you don't even have feet on the ground. Right. So Yeah, I don't know. It was a principle I came up with a long time ago. I never named it. I always thought, if
I
I
like it a
named this,
lot.
I could probably sell books, but
Yeah,
it's just, I call it, I mean, I just win.
yeah.
I just always win.
And if you think
And
about it, that's what happened
sorry.
in the last 8 years. The
Yeah.
first, what happened was 8 years ago, there was some who didn't understand who Trump was. They took him
Yeah.
face value. They didn't understand he's a New Yorker. That's what a
Right.
New Yorker talks like. And others
Right.
said, no, he's really the real deal. He's really racist and this and that and all stuff, right? And so 4 years passed by for Trump, then 4 years passed by Biden. And they learned along the way.
Yeah.
They were learning along
Well
the way.
said.
And then he woke
Yeah.
up. My goodness. They said, and they weren't ashamed themselves. They listened. We were learning. We failed. We misunderstood. We failed. And we're getting up. And
Yeah.
70% of the country woke up. And that's
I
exactly
think
what you're
so
saying.
too. I think so too. And I'm happy about it because it was really touch and go there. And I was very, very scared about this election. And not that I thought Kamala was going to win fair and square. I don't think Biden won in 2020. And I mean, I'll never change my mind on that unless someone presents me with evidence that shows. But I think the Democrats cheated, and I think they cheated with the help of the world government and the Uniparty and the UN. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Right.
So what was really scary is that these last 4 years with the Democrats and liberals that I was arguing with is they'd go, hey, we had the mandate. We got Biden and he got 81 million votes. You're the minority. And I knew that wasn't true. But they thought it was true. It was very hard to argue. And then when Biden went on the debate with Trump and he was basically showing that his brain was fried, I thought, okay, we're going to win because there's no way they can steal it this time. No one's going to believe a guy who can't talk. And then when Biden dropped out, I was like, this is scary because they're going to put Michelle Obama or Kamala or Governor Newsom, somebody that's got at least charisma and can finish a sentence. Well, not Kamala, but the other two could. And I said they still wouldn't win in a fair fight with Trump, but they can cheat now, and people would think it was possible. So I was really scared that they're going to cheat for Kamala, and I think we all were scared, and we all knew that, and that's why we turned out in droves and voted and voted. We're too big to rig. I was like, that was it. We were voting early and often, and that's how we stopped it. But what's so funny, sorry, I have a point here. What's so funny is that after the election, the Democrats were then calling and saying that we had committed mass election fraud because there were missing votes. Biden got 81 million and Kamala only got 70. That's 11 million missing people. It's like, no, those people never existed to begin with.
Right.
So then they had to face that moment of, oh my God, we stole 2020, which they couldn't do. They're entrenched. And now they're trying to steal seats in the House. The vote count in California, Arizona, they stole from Kerry Lake. They still cheated. Yeah. They're still cheating as of now. So anyway, it's never gonna end. It's a war for the end of times.
You can see it there. Basically, the Tucker Carlson said a very interesting point 2 days ago. To what extent is the extreme left evil? The point that they are willing to make a war with Russia. But they launched missiles, So basically, they want to give Trump, hey, here's a nuclear war in your lap. To that extent, they want to defeat Trump. They want to defeat the people who woke up. They don't want to basically go out within 6 weeks, say, okay, we lost. Here's the country. Take it over. Do what you want. That really shows who they are. Exactly shows who they are.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. And that proves what you're saying before. There is something behind all of this. I don't know if you ever saw the video of this guy who made a video about 30 years ago. I can send to you. It was really shocking. He said, you'll see in about the year 2019, this is early 1990s. He said, you'll see about 2019, 2018, there's going to be a worldwide epidemic. And people will be able to take a vaccine. Do you ever see that video?
No.
He said,
send it to me.
I'll send it to you. And then he said, even more scarier. He said the following, he said, well, after that, about a few years later, about the year 2020, 22, you start seeing that UFOs have landed on Earth, and people now have to unite together because the UFOs are going to attack Earth and make one world government. Lo and behold, what's happening now? All of a sudden, aliens, UFOs, and so forth. This is a new pandemic. In 2020, they gave, in 2018, 2019, they gave a Trump the pandemic to worry about. Now they're giving Trump UFOs. for all of a sudden coming. We don't have bodies, the UFOs. We don't know where they are, but they're UFOs.
Well, it's Project Bluebeam too. I don't know if you ever looked that up, but you can look that up. That's it's alien simulation, or a false return of the Messiah is also one of the things they plan to unify people, which sounds good, but they mean unify slavery, which is terrifying.